listening to the Pump Take Basketball Show with Marco Goldblatt and Kale Meyer.
Hey everybody, how's it going? You're welcome back to another episode of the Pump Take Sports basketball segment. I'm here today with Marco, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that's it's been a bit of a hot topic around the NBA in the last couple of weeks, and that is the buyout market. So I'm sure many of you have heard that have followed the NBA in the news that anonymous GMs have been complaining about how the market works. They're saying things that the buyout system isn't fair, you shouldn't be adding players to your team this late without giving anything up, and that the buyout market just generally helps the rich get richer. So today, what me and Marco are going to be doing is we're just going to be going quickly over how the buyout market works, some issues that have risen to prominence with it recently, and maybe some solutions to how this works in the NBA and just generally what we think about it. So, Marco, do you want to start us off about the buyout market here?
Yeah, sure, man. I'll just go through. I think it's good, valuable, just to maybe just go through how it works a little bit. So I'll just give an example. So essentially, if let's say I'm a Laker playing for the Lakers, and they owe me like, I don't know, $1 million for this season and $2 million for next season, let's just say. So I'm on contract for 2 years. And let's say the Lakers really kind of don't want me there that much anymore. And I kind of feel the same way. I feel like I could excel on another team. And, I'm kind of done with the Lakers. Let's say this was the Lakers like 5 years ago. The Lakers now, because I don't think anyone now would want to leave the Lakers. But
just a random team.
Just a random team, right?
Unnamed team.
Unnamed team. Myself, the player, because I am, I'm an amazing NBA player. Myself and the team can kind of come to a deal. We can negotiate the contract, and let's say if I had $1 million this year and $2 million next year, maybe they pay me 1.5 mil total, and I kind of forfeit the rest of my money. So I'm not making everything that I would make on my contract. I'm making, let's say, half or a quarter or three quarters or whatever. But I'm forfeiting some of my money for them to buy me out. I then become a free agent, and then I'm contractless, and I either will get signed by a team or maybe I don't. And I think that most people that go into the buyout market are kind of accepting.
They know they're going to get signed by a team, though. Most of the time.
Most of the time, that a player that will come to a agreement with a team, a lot of the time they're like, as we've seen this year, they're like an older player on kind of a larger contract. And both of these teams, the team and the player, the two parties, kind of want to come to a decision together because it mutually benefits their team. So Lamarcus Aldridge is a great example. He was on a pretty significant contract on a team that doesn't really look like it's going to push that far or even make the playoffs. And I think he had 2 or 3 years left on his contract. So it's just beneficial for both teams because no one wants to take on Lamarcus Aldridge's contract. Because he's on such a big contract.
But the issue is that it's not beneficial for both teams because it's like,
both parties.
But it's a lose-lose scenario for the team that's buying them out because sure they
like
have
the Spurs,
like the Spurs or the Lakers. Like there's the main examples like the Lakers signing Drummond and the Nets picking up Blake Griffin and Lamarcus Aldridge. Like those are the primary buyouts that I'm going to talk about in this episode. So these are three guys that their best days as NBA players are clearly behind them, particularly for like Griffin and Aldridge, because they used to be perennial all-stars, but now they're not like those main guys on the team now, but they're not bad players. Like,
no, they're kind of average.
They're kind of average. And the argument could definitely be made that those guys are above average, or not above average, but they're above like veteran minimum deals that they're getting signed to in the buyout market. So like, when you're talking about that, it benefits both teams. My main issue with it is that teams should all have the equal opportunity to manage the assets that they have under contract. And I don't think that the buyout market really lets them do this. It's because like those three guys that we mentioned, I believe all of their respective teams were trying to trade them before the deadline. Yeah. But with the buyout market, they just don't have any leverage to trade them because teams like the Lakers and the Nets, they know that it is beneficial for the Spurs and the Cavaliers and the Pistons to get rid of those contracts So there's there's no leverage in trade negotiations for smaller market teams, because they know the teams that those guys are going to go to they're teams that they have a lot of cap space. They can afford to go into luxury tax if need be, and they're competing for rings, and that's where those guys want to go. And the Lakers and the Nets of the league, they have no incentive to even trade like a second or third round pick for
literally no incentive
for a guy
at
like
all.
Lamarcus Aldridge, because they know that he's going to be bought out.
Yeah, and I guess if you're the Spurs in this case with Lamarcus Aldridge or whatever, any team in this scenario, you kind of have to buy them out, because if, as you were saying, you have no leverage. If you don't, you're sitting on a huge contract, and your rebuild process, let's say that the Spurs want to rebuild, which they probably do, your rebuild process is kind of diminished or harmed, because you can't get rid of this big contract with this player that, might not even really want to play for your team anymore, and also is just locked up for the next couple of years, like a Drummond, like a Griffin, and like an Aldridge, right? I guess where I like come at it is that I wasn't thinking about it from like a league perspective. I was thinking about it almost like a business perspective. If there's two people or two parties that agree to something and it's beneficial for both of them in that bubble, right? In principle, it should be fair.
But it doesn't exist in that bubble.
Yeah,
because there's outside pressures and implications that are just like even the reason that's happening. Like, say theoretically, you remove the possibility of being bought out and going to a team like the Lakers or the Nets. Aldridge,
I like that.
Aldridge, Griffin, and Drummond are all still like they never get sat. They're playing on the court for the respective teams who are trying to trade them, but they're not just sitting them. They're not just sitting them to prepare them for the trade and then eventually buy them out if they can't find it. But the problem is that they're almost forced to do that, because when you're a small market team that has one of those guys under contract, like I said before, it's a lose-lose situation, because your options that you're looking at is either one, you do not buy them out, and you sit on a big player just out of principle of not letting somebody else get them. But you're leaving money on the table for your organization if you do that.
Yeah.
So, and then your second option is obviously to buy them out and get nothing in them for a trade, because any team that guy on a smaller deal will be valuable to, you have no leverage to get any sort of asset from them. So when a team is presented with those two options, neither of them are good.
One is just the lesser of two evils.
One is just the lesser of two evils, because you're saving the money and just like you're wiping your hands clean of it. But I don't think that's like necessarily a fair thing for smaller organizations to have to choose to do.
Yeah, and to loop it back to your original comment about how, it's been like kind of a hot topic recently, because these people like heads or coaches, I don't know if it was managers or coaches or whatever.
It was owners.
Exactly.
Owners and
that would make sense.
Owners and GMs, like they were described as anonymous executives, and I believe there was 3 different
Exactly. Guys. But you know what? It's not that anonymous, because we know that it wasn't, owners and GMs of the Lakers.
Yeah, or the Knicks, or like
exactly.
Chicago,
so
or like
and I think that is where, like, I think that's a lot of our, the conversations that me and you have had just about more like the league in general have boiled down to like this central issue that seems to be kind of unfixable, which is that those big market teams, players want to play for them, and they have that advantage. And that's not the only advantage that they have, but that is one of the biggest advantages, right? Is like with the league coming to more of like a player empowerment stance, I guess, those players want to go play for teams that are competing, and also in, cities that are fun to play in. But I guess, bringing you back to the buyout market thing, I know we were talking before we started recording that you've heard some ideas for solutions. So I don't know if you want to
Yeah, there
There
are some solutions. The last thing I want to say on the issue of it is that there's such a discrepancy in who the buyout market benefits, and this is why like the solutions that I was talking to you about before are, in my opinion, need to be brought up, because there needs to be some sort of cap put on this. I think it's a big problem because it benefits those big market teams so much more than others because they're the attractive destination. If you look like a team that is competitive but is not a big market destination, like the Bucks. The Bucks were going to be my example. Like Milwaukee's not attracting the Aldridges and the Griffins and the Drummonds in the buyout market, but that's not a fair way for it to operate. They don't even have an equal opportunity to seek out those players. And I know like there was a whole narrative like going around like that, like Drummond and like Aldridge and Blake Griffin they're all just like washed up, like old injury prone big men that are like shitty for the NBA, but they have valuable skill sets.
They do.
It's easy to sit there and say when those guys are getting paid like $25+ million a year that, oh, they suck and they're not worth their contract. But when you put those guys on a competitive team on a vet minimum deal, those veterans look a lot more attractive, and they undoubtedly have an impact.
Any team in the league would take these players on a vet minimum.
Absolutely.
Any team in the league, because they provide things that are not. They obviously have skill on the court, and I think like Blake Griffin, he's looking like good actually on the Nets. Like he's dunking, and he hasn't dunked in like 2 years before he played on the Nets. He's shooting threes. He's making plays. Like you can tell he's happy to play there. And I think any team in the league would want to sign a player like that for that small. I don't know what his contract is. Do you know? But it's a vet min. Like, is it $5 million, something like that?
Like, it's not very much.
It's cheap.
It's not very much at all.
He was on it's literally what 20% of what his original contract was on the Pistons. Something crazy like that. And I think any team would want a player like that, Aldridge, Drummond, or Griffin on a contract for so cheap, considering what they bring to the table is not only their skill set, but also their veteran presence, and just a bunch of kind of intangible things that any team would want, right?
Yeah, and just to finish what I was saying before is that those guys are still big name players, and the reason that this buyout market it disproportionately benefits some teams, but it's not addressed because these types of stories happening is beneficial for the NBA, and there's no reason for them to address it. Like if you're Adam Silver and like the Cavaliers GM or the Pistons GM is pissed at you over the Lakers or the Nets GM being mad, it's like you don't care. Like those big storylines of Blake Griffin goes to the Nets and joins like Brooklyn's big three. Memes. That's just like that's free money for the NBA, and I think that's a big part of the reason why they don't seem to even have like a desire to acknowledge that this is a problem. It needs to be anonymous GMs that are like leaking their opinion to the media that they think that this isn't fair for them to run their organization under these conditions. And I don't think it's right, and I don't think that it's fair that the NBA doesn't address this in some way.
Yeah, I definitely think you're making some good points there, and yeah, man, I agree. I don't think I have anything to say about the topic anymore, other than solutions. Do you want to share some?
So there was actually one really interesting solution that I read recently, and that was to institute. There were actually a couple of interesting solutions. One of them was to institute a sort of bidding system, whereas when a player and a team agree to a buyout, the amount of money that the player is willing to give up, it becomes open to bidding around the league. So teams can bid with cap space or any sort of cap exception that they might have. And if any team that wins that auction acquires that player that was bought out. And then the amount of the winning bid goes on the team's payroll and it gets removed from like the prior team's payroll. The interesting that I found about this that would kind of address the main obstacle to this issue, and that's that the NBA is just so central around player empowerment, and that the Players Association, in the current iteration of that solution, that would just not be allowed to happen because the player has no no choice for where they go. And that just
Yeah.
that wouldn't be something that
work.
gets passed.
Mm.
But an interesting way that I read to address this is that you let the player also bid in the market. Let me explain that. So
spicy.
If the player wins the auction, he has the opportunity then to become an unrestricted free agent as he would in the current session, but by winning the auction. And then the amount of his winning bid is what is taken off of his salary and removed from his previous team's payroll. So it would sort of be then up to the player that if you really want to end up in a specific destination, fine. Put a dollar amount on how much do you want to sacrifice in guaranteed money to end up at that destination that you want. And I think that's a good way to sort of like balance the issue of player empowerment and letting guys have like a choice in where they go with their careers, and just not completely just letting it just be an absolute free for all where the big market teams just have every single opportunity at players in the buyout market.
Yeah, dude. This is the first time that I'm hearing about this idea, and I like it a lot. It sounds very interesting. I guess the question that I have, this is a genuine question, not a pre-thought one. I'm trying to wrap my head around, how it would work, right? Let's say a player gets that top bid, right? And then he decides, let's say it's Blake Griffin, right? He decides he wants to go to the Nets still. What is the contract that the Nets would have to pay Griffin? Is it still it's whatever contract they want, or does it have something to do with anything else?
At that point, it would be anything that they want. It would be once the player's bid, once the player wins the bidding, he's an unrestricted free agent.
Got it.
So it would be the exact same way that it's now, that if Blake Griffin gets bought out, he can seek out whatever contract and sign whatever he wants. But in order to do that, so say
he has to outbid other teams. Yeah.
Say league-wide bidding has bid up to $8 million on Blake Griffin. But he's going to go, the team that bid $8 million is the Magic or something. Blake Griffin doesn't want to go to the Magic.
Yeah.
So he decides that in order for me to become a restricted free agent, I need to bid $9 million. And then that would just be an extra reduction of $1 million of guaranteed money that he would receive from his buyout. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think definitely the problem of, players wanting to go to the teams they want to go to, which is usually big market teams, is still there. But in this case, it almost is like, asking a player to put their money where their mouth is and to kind of decide what's more valuable to them. Mm-hmm. Is it the contract, is the money, or is it like, do you really just want to not make a lot of money and go win or go play for about your team that you really want to play for?
And also just like the fact that under this proposition that a player wouldn't just be guaranteed to be able to go wherever they want. Mm-hmm. It also creates a lot more incentive for them to just like, if you're a guy like Blake Griffin and you're making $30 million a year, to just like to just stay on their current team if they want him to play. It would just put a lot more power back in the hands of the organizations, which is just something that I think the NBA, especially when you're looking at small market teams, is really missing now.
Yeah, for sure. No, I like that idea a lot, because I think one of the central problems, player aside, is that as you were saying, like the initial team has no leverage. This would provide them that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Dude, I like the solution. I think it's definitely better than, what is happening now. And I think it's like fun too. It's not just, it seems like would be something that would be good for the media and good for the NBA. Like, whoa, a player gets to bid on themselves. Like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting idea when I read it.
For sure. Is there any other ones that you'd like to bring up, or?
Oh, the last one that I want to bring up, it was we earlier when me and Marco were talking off the recording, we compared it kind of similar to how our fantasy basketball league works, where you have an acquisition limit every week of the amount of players that you can add from the waivers. So one solution that I've seen brought up, and I think this is one that's been particularly popular amongst the executives that have an issue with the buyout market, is that you put a cap on the amount of players that you can acquire through the buyout market each season or biannually or whatever sort of time frame that you want to pick. So what that would allow is that you need to be smart with how you use your buyouts. You don't just like what happened with the Nets this year, where they just went and just picked Aldridge and Blake Griffin just right out of free agency. You need to be a little bit more selective with that because you don't know who you could have the opportunity to get next year or the year after that. And if you have some sort of accusation limit, teams would be a lot more reserved and just like picking any player they want from the buyout market.
Yeah, facts. I cut out a little bit there, but I think I totally understand what happened. I caught the beginning.
Yeah, right.
I caught the end. And I think I know what's going on. And yeah, I like that. I like that as well, man. I think both those solutions are good. And I think just the idea of proposing something different and just trying to make those small market teams have more of a chance is something that's definitely valuable. And I think in the era of player empowerment, it can get a little crazy.
Any effort to just sort of level the playing field a little bit would be, in my opinion, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. And with that, I think that's, unless Marco has any other points to make, I think that's all we have to say about the issues that have been going on with the buyout market in the last couple of weeks. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. And if you have any thoughts on any issues with the buyout market or solutions that you think could be implemented, let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Cheers.